Hello, good morning, everybody. My name is Dr. Matthew Pogorski. I am a clinical neuropsychologist in the Learning and Development Center at the Child Mind Institute. I am super excited this morning to join you to talk about parenting during the coronavirus and what are some things that you can do also to help your child through this time. The main topic that we're going to be sort of focusing on today is standardized testing and what you can do as parents to help your child through standardized testing. What are some things that kids can do to prepare themselves? I think one of the things right now that is that we're seeing is that a lot of the test companies that publish the standardized tests, such as the SATs and ACTs, have all postponed their standardized tests for a while. What I'm seeing right now is like early June. So we can talk about what that sort of shift means and how to manage that shift effectively. I think my sense is there's also probably some questions that might come up around how to manage anxiety during this time when it comes to testing and grades and schoolwork and performance and college admissions. And those are all really valid things that we should definitely talk about, and I can answer some of your questions about that. And then what does this mean for the future of standardized test taking, and how do we also help kids that have some sort of learning disability or learning challenge through this time? So I just want to actually jump right in with you guys and field actually a few questions that we had gotten prior leading up to this to our Facebook Live event. So we actually got a great question from one of our families who has a son with dyslexia, and this parent asked, the student's currently in high school and they're preparing for the SATs, and the question is, we had help at school, but now we're trying to figure it out on our own. What can we do? And I think that's a really amazing question, because we have to think about sort of backup plans and other options that we can do during this time, because the coronavirus has really upended our lives in so many ways. It's really important to think how we can shift our thinking and be flexible, right? And what I first want to share before even answering this question is just to validate that a lot of folks have these same concerns right now, right? There's a lot of people out there who are worried about how to manage these things. And how do we prepare for all these different shifts? So I just want to first let the parent know who asked this great question, you guys are not alone in this process. So I think for students that have learning disabilities, dyslexia being the most common learning disability that's out. And just to clarify actually about dyslexia, dyslexia is a disorder of reading that involves difficulty with word recognition, and it's actually based on a language-based weakness, not a visual weakness. So that's just an important thing to know and sort of put out there, because I think there's a lot of myths about dyslexia. But dyslexia really gets in the way of children being able to learn to read words, which can really hamper their fluency and their eventual comprehension. So for students that have a history of learning disabilities that have been diagnosed, really the first thing to do for any standardized test is to make sure that your son has appropriate and proper accommodations in place for taking the test. And the really interesting thing about accommodations, for instance, extended time, is that accommodations in and of themselves aren't really an intervention, meaning that they're not going to directly improve your child's test scores. But what accommodations do help out with is actually often reducing the anxiety that kids feel when they're taking some sort of test, especially kids with learning disabilities where it might take them a little bit longer to read the material. It might take a little bit longer for them to develop some understanding of what they're reading, right? So accommodations can actually help reduce anxiety by just allowing some more time to be able to process what's in front of them. And when we reduce anxiety, that in turn actually helps kids be able to focus better and remember what they're studying and the information. So it's important to note actually with the SATs, they have postponed their tests, their most recent test, till early June. So the good news is that you actually now have more time to prepare and to continue studying in advance for that test. I think in the meantime, it's important that if your son already has a tutor that's been helping out with test preparation, that you continue to stick with that tutoring. If your son already has a tutor for reading remediation, if they're working, for instance, on comprehension, you should continue to stick with that also. I think it's really important to try and keep as much of a routine in place as possible, and for as much as we can during this sort of crazy and unprecedented time, trying to keep things stable and routine and structured is really important for all kids. So that's just something I wanted to mention. Also, what I want to mention is that there are actually plenty of tutors and learning specialists that I've seen who have posted on professional listservs that I'm involved in, and those are things I check pretty regularly because, hey, why not? But a lot of the tutors and learning specialists out there who have experience in working with students with learning disabilities, such as dyslexia, are actually doing virtual tutoring and remote sessions still. And so they can actually continue to tackle areas that need ongoing support. So my sort of overall takeaway message is keep doing what you're doing if you're already studying. Know that you have some more time now because the SATs have been pushed back for a little bit, and make sure that you have accommodations in place for going into the exam, so that way we can make sure that your son's not feeling too overwhelmed or too anxious about finishing, for instance, in a certain amount of time. So that was just one question we received earlier. I'm going to take a step back and reintroduce myself. So my name is Dr. Matthew Pogorski. We're on Facebook Live this morning answering your questions about parenting during the coronavirus. What do we do during this really challenging time? I also want to give a shout out again to the resources that we have on our website. We have a ton of resources for families. So the link to access those resources is child.org/coronavirus. And you can actually access resources related to helping kids manage their anxiety, working on kids that have behavioral challenges at home, kids who are struggling to maintain motivation with online learning this time. So there are a ton of resources you can access there. I did actually want to also, I got a question the other day from a parent that I've been working with for some time now. And their question to me was the following. So this is a family that I worked with, and they said that they had been preparing for an upcoming test, but it was canceled, and we don't know when it will be rescheduled. Should my son keep studying to stay in the habit? And so I wanted to share this question with the larger audience here because I thought it was a really valuable question. I think it's probably a question that's on a lot of other parents' minds too. So my answer to that, and I think what's really important, is to keep in mind what your child's studying style is to best prepare them. If your child's the type of student who takes a long time to get started back up, if he or she doesn't study consistently, then I would suggest that they continue studying, but maybe not as much each day. And actually what we know as far as the research on studying in advance for standardized tests and studying for tests in general is that it's not so much about the amount of time that you put in at one time, it's really how you use your time effectively. So if you break up your studying over a long period of time and put in 30 to 40 minutes of intense active studying, over a big stretch of time, that's actually a really effective way to prepare for a test. On the other hand, if your child's the type of student who has trouble sustaining studying habits over a long period of time, that might be something you want to work on. But also, if you know that your child's the type of student who will forget the information that they studied a while ago, then maybe holding off for a little bit longer and creating a schedule with your child once you know when the test will be scheduled could be really helpful. And I think that sort of dovetails with a lot of sort of the overarching themes of what to do during this time. And it really is about creating consistency, creating structure for your child, making sure that they can get into a good schedule and a good routine every single day. And a schedule can also help children feel less anxious about what's going to happen. If they know what they can anticipate, if they know what's going to be ahead of time, right? We all benefit from schedules in our life. We all benefit from feeling that we have control and we know what's going to happen in the future. So creating those schedules can be super helpful. The other thing I would actually recommend is keep checking the websites of the companies that are that publish these tests. So for instance, I know the SATs and the ACTs, when you click on their homepage, you can actually, at the top, they have guidance for families on what to do now for the coronavirus and how long they expect these things to last for and when the new dates of tests are being scheduled. So I would keep checking those websites to see if any new information keeps coming up, and a lot of it seems to be on most of their homepages, which is really good because it's really clear and accessible. To wrap up that question, so the main sort of points I would keep in mind is really identifying what your child's studying style is. Try to create a schedule and a routine no matter what. Try and still keep as much time as possible to be able to study intensively, but maybe not as long, but maybe for a shorter period of time over a longer duration, and start to think about creating study habits that are really effective for your child as well. So another check-in, my name is Dr. Matt Pogorski. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist here at the Child Mind Institute. I'm answering your questions on this beautiful sunny morning here in New York City on how to parent during the coronavirus. And the topic that we're really focusing on today is what do we do for standardized testing, which I think is definitely a big concern right now and is something that a lot of people are probably wondering, what do we do? How do we manage these expectations? And I think flexibility is really key here as well. Understanding that these are really unprecedented times, knowing that there's going to be things that constantly change and that are new and developing. So it's really important to keep a flexible mindset, and super important also to stay calm during this time and to allow yourself a lot of self-compassion. And I think that's something that I emphasized during my previous talk earlier this week, is really having compassion for yourself, having compassion and empathy for others during this time. I think everyone is sort of in the same boat. We're all trying to figure out how to make this work. How do we feel, how can we still keep our lives enjoyable and relaxing and satisfying and meaningful and supporting our children. And so that's something that we here want to help out with too. So I wanted to actually tackle another question that I received earlier this week leading up to the talk today. And so this question was from one of our teachers actually. And this teacher reached out to us and they wanted to know, how much time should kids spend each day studying for standardized tests? And how far ahead should kids start? So I think this is a really great question, and it's awesome to hear from teachers out there. First, before answering this question, I also just want to give a shout out and kudos to all the teachers out there who are making this work during this time. I know it can be a really difficult transition, so thank you so much for all the hard work and all the amazing things that you guys are doing right now. So to answer the question again, which is how much time should kids spend each day studying for standardized tests? How far ahead should we start? So some general tips for studying for any standardized test that I want to share is really that the emphasis should be on studying slow and steadily. What we know about the brain and what we know when it comes to learning and retaining new information is that time and repetition are key to making things stick, right? So it's also super helpful for making sure that you're able to call back information when it comes time for taking tests. So again, time and repetition are super key to making things sticky. That's what we know about the brain. That's what we know about cognitive development, how that works. Well, we also know from the research actually on studying strategies, and there's actually a lot of great research out there. One of the most impactful study strategies, tongue twister, is distributing studying over multiple sessions, which goes along with that time and planning things out. So intensive study sessions, which can be super helpful. And I'd say like you'd want to shoot for like 30 to 45 minutes of intensive study sessions. If you do those, that can be really helpful instead of trying to spend a marathon cramming information in the library. In fact, what we know about cramming is that if you keep studying for multiple hours on end, the brain just doesn't have that kind of capacity to soak up that much information at once, and we get tired. And when we get tired and our attention fluctuates, then we lose engagement. It's harder just to remember information. Along those lines, it's really important to keep in mind is how you use your study time, not really as much how long that you study, right? So like I just said, long study sessions can really lead to a lack of concentration and a lack of learning and retention. I think a point that I touched on before, which is really helpful to keep in mind here, is really thinking about making a schedule and sticking to it. So working with your child ahead of the test to set a reasonable timeline for studying can be super helpful. Now that we know, for instance, that the SAT has been pushed back to early June, you can really create a plan and a schedule over the next 2 months about how to practice and distribute studying time. Even if that means 30 to 45 minutes of intense active studying a day, that's going to be super fruitful and really give you great outcomes. So really making schedules is super important. The main message here that I want to get across to recap as well is not so much about how long you study, but rather how you use your study time. Also, making sure that you're studying slow and steadily over a long period of time is really helpful. That last minute cramming, what we know just about cognitive development and learning is that just makes it really harder to remember information. Speaking of information, I want to actually give a plug to our amazing list of resources that we have on our website. So if you visit childmind.org/coronavirus, again, that's childmind.org/coronavirus, we actually have a slew of amazing resources. This website is also continuing to be published and updated pretty often, so there's going to be more resources on there. So I encourage families and parents and teachers and all of our viewers out there to keep checking the website for more resources as they continue to be published through that link. So we're going to wrap up in a few minutes. I think we have time for probably one more question, and this is actually a question I got from one of my parents of a child that I evaluated and that I've been working with. And their question to me was, what are the best tools to help kids prepare for tests at home? Is it practice tests? Is it flashcards? What do you recommend? I feel so behind. And I think a lot of probably families can understand that and can understand that and are probably living through that to some extent right now and relate to that. That's the word I want to use. So the best types of ways to studying are really important to understand. Well, we know from the research on sort of the different tools and things that can prepare kids to help studying for tests. Practice tests can be super helpful, actually, because it helps you learn the test format in advance. Flashcards can be helpful too, but there's definitely an important caveat. You don't want to rely just on flashcards, because flashcards really, there's a lot of rote memorization there. And what we know is that actually rote memorization shouldn't be the only study tool that we use. Rather, it's really super duper important to make sure that we're engaging in active learning as well. We know that learning information really requires actively engaging in the material. So really paraphrasing it, making it your own, not just reciting notes, not just reading and rereading. That's not that helpful. It's really being able to extrapolate the information, to be able to take the information that we've written notes about and make it our own and incorporate it into our own schema, our own way of thinking. So active engagement really is the process of taking meaning from text and reading that involves making connections, forming examples, and also just regulating your own kind of learning. So some ways of actively engaging in material: you can create study guides by topic, formulating questions and problems and writing complete answers. Become a teacher. Be your own teacher. Say the information aloud in your own words as if you were the instructor and actually teaching someone. You could, if you have a younger sibling at home or even an older sibling, you can be your child. You can make them your child's audience or student. I know my wife used to do that with her younger siblings, so and she's certainly benefited from it. But you want to encourage kids to be their own teacher. Derive examples that relate to your own experiences. I remember once I was working with a student who had a love for wrestling and was on the wrestling team at school, and we're coming up with organizational skills and strategies, and all the things that we did were actually related to wrestling moves. So we had a move called the half Nelson, and that was like talking aloud your problem. We had another move, I can't remember the name of the move, but it was like creating a plan ahead of time. So thinking about how you can create it to like a passion or something like in your own day-to-day can be actually really helpful to retain information, because you're creating an emotional connection around the material. And we know that emotion and memory sort of like hang out together in the brain, and they really drive each other. So it's really important to create it to your own emotional experience. Creating concept maps or diagrams, especially if you really benefit from having visual information in front of you and you're more of a visual learner, that can be super helpful if you have a lot of verbal information. Trying to, for some like non-technical classes, if that's like English or history or psychology, trying to figure out the main theme or message is really important to focus on. And it's, again, really about actively engaging with the material and having that be part of your study strategy. And then finally, my last piece of advice is really know where you study best. So some people actually prefer super quiet spaces like a library, and because they can just focus and concentrate, and they don't need that. I know for me, that doesn't work though. Like I need music on, I need something engaging. Like when I'm writing my reports and like typing things up, I actually listen to music constantly, and I know I couldn't just sit in silence because I'm going to lose focus, and that's totally fine too. So if you're the kind of person who needs the background noise like music, or you need to be whether it's classical music or some sort of like in between, you obviously don't want it to be too distracting. You don't want to have it get in the way of your studying, but making sure that you can just have something in the background could also be super helpful too. I know that works for me personally. So I just want to, again, let everyone know. So my name is Dr. Matthew Pogorski. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist here at the Child Mind Institute, joining you on this beautiful sunny morning from New York City. And we're talking this morning about parenting during the coronavirus, what you can do during this time to help your children. The main topic this morning was standardized testing, and what you can do to support your child with standardized testing during this time. A lot of standardized tests have been postponed, have been pushed off. As I was doing research more and more about this topic, it seems to me, which is actually really encouraging, is that a lot of the test companies are trying to publish information and keep families up to date and be really clear and transparent and explicit about when these changes to their routines, which I think is super helpful. I also just want to let everyone know you can access all the, we have a bunch of materials and resources through our website, childmind.org/coronavirus. Once again, childmind.org/coronavirus. We have resources on anxiety, disruptive behavior disorders. That website and link is constantly being updated, constantly being published. So there's a ton of materials that are on there already, but it's going to continue to be updated. So keep checking back for new resources and different things that will pop up there so that we can continue to help out our families during this time. I also want to sort of, while we have a few more minutes, I think, is talk about sort of like some future possibilities. So right now, you know, we're trying to think of other topics and other things that we want to be able to help parents with and families with and teachers and all sorts of folks. So so we encourage your feedback. We encourage what you want to know. We're going to continue to be have more of our clinicians engaging in these Facebook Live sessions. We have another one coming up this afternoon as well at 4:30, so make sure that you tune into that. We're going to continue to be doing these because we've gotten so many great questions and people have really found these so beneficial. And I can speak for myself, it really brings us a lot of joy to be able to help families during this time and this crisis and being able to continue to support everybody out there with resources. So we're going to keep doing those. This afternoon, the topic is we're going to be discussing ADHD this afternoon. I think that's a really great topic since we know that ADHD is actually the most common childhood psychiatric disorder, actually worldwide, which is really interesting. And I'm sure folks have a lot of great questions and they want to know how they can help their child at home with ADHD. So please be sure to tune into that. That, again, is this afternoon at 4:30. We're going to be discussing ADHD, not me, but a different clinician. But I hope to be back with you guys soon. Thank you all so much for tuning in this morning. I'm going to be wrapping up now. It was a pleasure to do this talk and engage with these great questions that we got. Please keep the questions coming. Please reach out to us with anything that you want to know. We want to be here for you guys during this really challenging time, and we will be here. We're not going anywhere. We're still up and running, and we're doing what we got to do. So thank you so much again, and I look forward to being back soon. Have a wonderful day. Thank you all so much.